Thanks for joining me this morning. My name is Christian Medina. I'm currently an IT support engineer. Just a little brief history about myself. The first computer I ever got was a Power Mac 6100. That might age me a little bit. It was running OS 9. My life has revolved around technology ever since then. My first role in helping people with technology was actually at the Apple Store as a specialist. I then went on to serve a 5-year enlistment in the US Navy as a cryptology technician. It should come as no surprise to anyone that I did not touch a Mac in any sort of professional capacity during my time in the United States Navy, so I obviously had to leave when that contract was over. After the Navy, I was a part of the desktop engineering team at BlackRock, and we helped them launch their Mac at BlackRock initiative. They went from having pretty much no choice of having Macs at their company to offering Macs to all incoming employees. And now I'm happily working with Apple devices again. I'm going to speak to you about what we've done at our company to improve our Jamf Pro infrastructure. So when we first got there, we had an old JSS. It was running version 9. Our JDS was just a Mac in the closet. We knew that the JDS was going to be deprecated, so we wanted to make sure that we were future-proofing ourselves. Self-service didn't work at all. I do not know why to this day. It was just kind of handed to me, and instead of trying to troubleshoot this old service, we just decided to go ahead and future-proof ourselves. From the beginning, improving the user experience was always the end goal. So I'm going to talk about things that have made managing Apple devices easier for IT. But ultimately, there are only 2 or 3 of us on the IT team and thousands of users. As a support engineer, my responsibility is to enhance the user experience. It's easy to get caught up in all the technical bits, but along the way, I'm always asking myself what impact this will have on the end user. This work is not done, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's consistently evolving, and we're always trying to improve, which is great because I like having a job. We've made some great strides, and I want to share with you today some of the things that we've done. So in the presentation, I'm going to go through some of the challenges, how we engineered our infrastructure, and then how we re-enrolled our fleet. We're also going to talk about the environment today. So at first, we were doing manual Mac and iPad configurations. We would literally get a shipment from Apple of Macs and iPads. In our small little tech services pod, we would open up all the boxes, have them lined out across desks, touch every single machine. And this is extremely time-consuming for engineers. And frankly, we had better things to do, especially when we have Jamf Pro with all this fantastic software that can take this load off of our hands. I spoke briefly about the Jamf Pro performance issues, namely self-service not working. We would push out policies, and things wouldn't get to their intended recipients. We had no public access. And for our company, this is a big deal. We have currently about 75 stores across the United States and Canada, and a lot of our Mac and iPad users and now iPhone users are remote, and they're not always in the store. Sometimes we would have trainings in hotels, which made it very difficult to enroll devices because they were off-net, so we needed public access. Another reason we needed public access was for security. If an iPad were to walk out of a store, we would have no way of wiping it. Our company deals with a lot of PII, so it's very important for compliance issues and also just as basic responsibilities to the consumer that we protect this information. Also, our store leaders tend to take their Macs home with them, so we want to be able to manage these machines off-net. One of the biggest challenges, and it continues to be a challenge, is file vault in a multi-user environment. So we have Macs in the stores currently that are shared by up to 10 people. And having file vault enabled on those machines has been a challenge. People always submit tickets about turning the machine off, restarting it, and not seeing their name, right? So we've come up with a bit of a workflow to put that power in their hands to make sure that they were enabled for file vault and people could log in. So when we were rebuilding our infrastructure, these were the goals we had in mind. We wanted a robust, scalable infrastructure, public access. We were going to use DEP and Jamf for zero-touch deployment, and we wanted a reliable self-service. Because of this, we went with AWS, Amazon Web Services. And we're using the following components: the EC2, or Elastic Compute Cloud, for our Jamf Pro Server, ELBs, or Elastic Load Balancing, which we place in front of the EC2s, an RDS, Relational Database Server, for our MySQL server, and an S3 bucket as our cloud distribution point. So this is a very basic graphic of the way that we have it set up. We have private and public. The Jamf Pro servers are pretty much in a clustered environment. We have the master in the private, and then we have secondary and public. Our S3 bucket is public, and the RDS is the shared database for both servers. So on the EC2s, we have the Jamf Pro server and its required components, Java, Tomcat, etc. We have this clustered. There's limited access to the public server, so we shut down that web application disabled message. We actually just turned it, it looks like a 404 error. We take the enroll API documentation and limit access to that. So it's basically just a headless server. And we use AWS Route 53 for DNS. So we have our, jamfpro.whatever.com. We use the Amazon RDS for our MySQL database. So we had to migrate our old database, which basically consists of just a SQL dump and then restore, into the new RDS. When we did the migration, we had to edit server settings for the new server, and then we edited configuration for scaling. So our S3 bucket is public. We previously used that JDS that I mentioned on a Mac Mini, which isn't a very scalable solution. And now we have no effect on our internal network when we're uploading big packages such as OS upgrades and things like that. We found that having these big packages on a file share distribution point like Samba or using HTTP, HTTPS was bogging down our network. So now we just use Amazon's unlimited resources to push these out. Now we use DEP, MDM servers, and PreStage enrollments extensively for all of our Apple devices. As you can see, we use a lot of Apple devices in our stores. So we have Macs, iPads, iPhones, and iPods that we use for music. The Macs, like I said, are store leader devices, and they're shared amongst management. The iPads are the point-of-sale devices, where associates also perform prescription checks, check email, chat. So they're actually the most used device in the stores for communication internally and externally. We're switching over to retail iPhones. We were using VoIP phones, which caused a lot of issues. One being that we found that the construction and the wiring was sometimes not reliable, so these phones would just go offline. We had a hard time activating them when we were setting up new stores. If the internet would go down, we would have no line out. So now we have iPhones, they have cellular reception. In the case that the internet goes down, people are still able to use their phones, and this is extremely important, especially for use cases like calling 911. We use Soundtrack Your Brand on music iPods. We were using another music service before, and we had a huge amp, we had a huge box that we paid for through this third-party vendor, and now we just use this Spotify for Business app on our little iPods. It's improved our workflow exponentially. All of these are set up with DEP. They all have their own PreStage enrollment. So when a user gets one of these devices, they pretty much just open the box, go through that normal DEP setup, they get their remote configuration. In the case of, let's say, the iPhones, I have the PreStage set up so that all you really see is the phone icon. Everything else is hidden in its own little Apple folder. So we make it very easy for the store personnel to just mindlessly set these things up and get going. So when we switched over to the new server, we wanted to use VPP extensively. We had a period of 2 production instances while we were doing this migration. We had machines on the old server that we were, throughout the week or so, moving over to the new server. So we had to get some new VPP accounts in place, some new server tokens unique to the server. I didn't realize this at first, and we were like, why aren't these VPP accounts working? How come we're not getting packages pushed out? And it was because we had this token on 2 servers, and it was getting very confused. So scaling for growth, we follow these best practices and recommended configuration. We used to have inventory updates on every policy, every time they were pushed out, and we were wondering why Tomcat was crashing. Then we figured out that these machines and these devices were hitting the JSS or Jamf Pro Server way too often, causing the server to get bogged down. We also allocated more memory to Tomcat. We edited the required config files. If you've ever taken the formerly known as CJA, now I believe is a 300 certification course, there are database.xml files, max threads, max pool size, connections, all these things. If you want to look into this further, Dear Flounder has a phenomenal article on scaling using these config files. So we made sure that we introduced this into the environment. We have 2 Memcache servers, which is actually being handled by AWS Elasticache. So we just set up those 2, connected to the JSS, and then AWS handles all of the back-end processes. So we had a new server, we had an old server. All these devices were in the old server, and we had to get them all moved over. We had about 943 iOS devices, approximately 196 Macs. We had to schedule all re-enrollments for 63 stores. Now, we could have just blindly pushed out a quick add package and hoped that these machines joined again for the Macs. But we wanted to also take this opportunity to get a better idea of the inventory in our stores. So we made sure that we had people actually touch each device. We took inventory on asset tags, serial numbers, etc. So we would have a very healthy new server, and we knew what was going on. Our project manager did a phenomenal job of scheduling 63 stores throughout all time zones in the US and Canada. And we had engineers available via HipChat, video, phone, to assist in the re-enrollment process. We documented how to re-enroll the machines, but we wanted to make sure that we were available just in case we had any issues, since for the vast majority of users, they've never seen anything like this. So for the Macs, we had 2 self-service policies for more granular control. We found that just pushing out or just having the quick add package as a self-service policy wasn't working for all machines because the old MDM certificate was still there. So it wouldn't actually re-enroll into the new server successfully. For non-DEP devices, we also, like iPads, we also did user-initiated enrollment. So for the self-service policies, the first policy pretty much removed all the configuration profiles, essentially getting rid of all like the Jamf binary and all those things. And then the second policy quickly pushed the quick add package and created in Recon to join the new server. So now we're shipping devices directly to retail locations. We're using DEP, NoMAD, and NoLoad. We still have file vault challenges, but like I said, we've addressed some of those, and we are using self-service extensively. So for device enrollment program, everyone's seen this sort of screen before. It's an easy setup for users. They power on the machine, they join our Wi-Fi network, and then they're instantly prompted with this remote management. They continue, enable location services, and then we have the following policies that are run at enrollment. We have this script, it's very, very simple, but we needed to make sure that certain things were run before other things, so we use custom triggers, and this simple script makes sure, for instance, that our no-load assets are loaded before the no-load application. This is for like our custom login screen, so we have our logo in our login screen, and if this policy wasn't run before the actual no-load install, they would just see a white box and it'd be very confusing. NoMAD has been a godsend. We use it to sync AD passwords to local accounts without binding our machines. We used to bind all our Macs, and it was very problematic. Binding initially is not really big of a deal, but we would find that machines would lose the binding for some unknown reasons, and then we'd have people all over the country not being able to log into their Macs. They didn't know why. We didn't know why. So we would have to go in with an admin account, rebind the machines. It was just a huge waste of time, but NoMAD really saved us on this one. This also keeps the user's local keychain and file vault passwords in sync, so there's no more annoying pop-ups when somebody changes their password in AD and they didn't change it on the local machine, and now every time someone logs in, they just pop up, cancel, 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 cancel. That was causing a lot of frustration. No load is fantastic. And you can tell how great these things are because Jamf just acquired them, right? So this gives us the ability to have a customized login window. So our company logo pops up in lieu of the macOS login window. And we have 80 credential login because we have NoMAD on the machine, but we're not actually binding. So they can use their 80 login, which they also use with other services, so it's front of mind, it's their identity. And then it performs just-in-time provisioning. So it creates a local standard account for these users, and it enables them for File Vault upon sign-in. This was fantastic. For a long time, we had trouble enabling accounts for File Vault. When High Sierra came out, I don't think I need to go into how difficult the secure token initially was for everyone. But now NoLoad has pretty much solved this problem. Somebody logs in, they're enabled for File Vault, they use AD, we don't bind, it's a great experience for everybody. We use self-service extensively. When we first have someone set up a machine, I actually give them documentation. It's a very simple process, but no one, so a lot of people haven't done this before, so they're not familiar. So I give them documentation, and one of the first things I have them do after getting to their desktop is to open self-service and run Apple software updates. So I'm kind of tricking them into opening this app and looking and seeing what policies they have available to them, so that if in the future they think, oh, I don't have this thing or I don't have this functionality, I'm going to open a ticket, they can bring forth to mind, oh yeah, I saw this in self-service. I can just pop open that and install Chrome or Firefox or whatever application I need. We also have some utilities in self-service. We have a policy that allows people to add printers through elevating to admin rights. And we also have a policy that I alluded to before for File Vault. So the person who initially sets up the computer is enabled for File Vault. They have the secure token. And when they want to enable other people in the store, there's a policy that they run. It elevates their permissions so they can go in and perform administrative functions. And then they can actually just enable people themselves. And I wrote up documentation step by step. So we have store leaders pretty much enabling other people in the store, and they don't have to reach out to engineers to get people enabled for File Vault. And that's it. So if anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Hi, Dave Waterbury. Question about enabling location. Do your users always check it on?
No, but the documentation helps a lot. Because there are so few steps and because Jamf has made it like really, really easy, it's only one of maybe 4 things that the user has to do. So we bold, italicize, the whole 9. And it's only like one of 5 screens, right? So for the most part, people are good about it. We also have a policy that just runs, and it sees that if the computer does not have enable location services enabled, that it would just do that for them.
Okay.
We used to run it very often, but then we looked at the logs, and it was hitting tons of machines. So we kind of scaled it back. But we do have some fail-safes. It's especially telling if somebody puts in a ticket and they're in California or if they're in New York and they have Cupertino time. We just tell them to go in self-service and click a button. We also have a policy in self-service for the same thing, just in case they didn't click that during setup.
So you've got a policy that will automatically enable it, that you can run overnight if it didn't kick through?
Right. We have a policy that is basically using a group to see what computers don't have it and enables it if they don't have it. We also have a policy in self-service that they can kick off manually. So yeah, we pretty much have the bases covered.
And then how is it that you're naming these computers?
We use a serial number. Okay. So in the PreStage enrollment, there's actually like a spot to set up the name when it's enrolled, and we just use like a variable in the serial number, and we just grab that.
All right. Thank you.
You mentioned that you moved away from on-prem Mac Minis for DPs. We would like to move towards this as well, but we have buildings and offices around the world that raise concern for bandwidth. Mm-hmm. May not have, the appropriation for internet. Do you currently have this problem? If you do, how are you managing it? And if you don't, how would you manage that?
So the S3 bucket, like I said, it's public. It's in the East Availability Zone in AWS. We have stores in California. We have stores in like Toronto. But we found that we've had no problems at all. Uploading the packages is quick. Downloading the packages has been equally quick. In the event that we found that things weren't being pushed out or there was some latency there, we can always just spin up another S3 bucket in a different availability zone. But we haven't found the need to do that at all.
Yeah, a little bit different if it's a corporate environment versus store environment.
So we have a corporate component, we have a retail component. So we definitely have, like, I kind of focus on retail, but we have tons of users in corp as well. But we also use that public S3 bucket for those corp machines too.
Awesome. I've heard that you cannot use the quick add package and the mobile config files, same thing that you get through user-initiated enrollment, more than once per device.
If you create it in Recon, then it's different.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
And then one last one. You mentioned that you have your users do the software updates through self-service when they first get their device after enrollment.
Right.
Do you completely trust them to do that, or do you have, as mentioned from a previous question, a backup in case they don't do it that runs automatically?
We trust them to do it. We also, I've heard a lot of presentations here where companies just give their users admin rights. We don't do that. We have a policy that will elevate you to admin rights for specific tasks. A lot of users don't really know what that policy is doing, and unless they watch the video afterward, they're still not going to know. We have like an allow printer administration. We have enable file vault. We don't want to make it more difficult than it has to be. So when a user just gets into self-service and they have in their mind, oh, I want to enable file vault, and they see a button that says enable file vault, they just do that, right? If they have it in their mind, I want to enable file vault, and they see make me an admin, maybe they don't know that that's what they need to do. So we just make that policy very specific. So we actually have a couple of policies that do exactly the same thing. They're just named something different so that the user is more easily able to identify them.
And you don't enforce file vault for your devices?
We do. We enforce file vault.
Okay, you just make it optional through self-service.
Well, we make enabling additional users an option in
got it.
self-service.
Okay.
So the file vault gets kicked off during that no-load login window when somebody signs in for the first time. They get the secure token, but only they can then enable other people. We used to do it where we have an admin account that would get pushed via the Jamf Pro Server to machines, but you can no longer do that. You can no longer have an admin account be enabled for File Vault. So now these people are the only ones that have the secure token, so they need to enable other users, which is fine because they're in the store with them and they're able to do that.
Yeah, thanks.
I had a quick one. It's fine if you have to shoot this one down. You kind of have the similar amount of clients as we have in ours. We've been thinking of moving to AWS. Can you ballpark a monthly budget for your AWS?
I have no idea.
Okay.
That's not my domain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever
Okay.
it is, it's worth it. I don't know.
All right, no worries.
Hi.
Hi.
How is your elevate to admin policies? How are they working? Are they running for a specific amount of time, just for a specific action? How does that work?
It runs for 2 minutes, so it pretty much just makes you an admin for 2 minutes. It's a pretty simple script. If you want offline, I can just point you to the script.
Great, thanks.
So I'm curious about what was your decision to go with AWS instead of something like Jamf Cloud? They're both hosted in the cloud. Was it cost? Was it something else, more control? What was the motivation behind AWS?
So this was about 1.5 years ago. We have a lot of other services in AWS. We had considered the cloud. I will say that in the certification courses that I attended prior to taking this project on, there was some discussion around Jamf Cloud, and those discussions led me to decide that maybe we wanted to just have a little bit more control over the environment. and we would be able to scale both horizontally and vertically as we saw fit. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that. Anybody else? Can we get a mic over here? Thanks.
Sorry, another one that came up. Since you mentioned that the secure token is only given to the users during enrollment and any subsequent real end user,
Right.
do you have a way of using a local admin account? What is your method for, if this user is no longer with us, we want to get into the machine? Do you just use file vault keys to get in? What's your method of administrating that machine locally?
So we have the file vault recovery key escrowed in the Jamf Pro Server, and we use that. Also, it's just a user education piece. Like if a store leader kind of leaves and they're the only one that's available to use that Mac, usually we just get the Mac back because the store leader is kind of like a one-to-one thing. For the management machines, it's very rare that like 8 people would quit in one day. So there's always someone there that can kind of log in. Sometimes, we still do get tickets where someone powers on a machine and that person is either not in the store that day or has left or whatever. And in those cases, we kind of do it like on a case-by-case basis, and maybe we'll have them go in with the recovery key and then just put like an admin account. But we've tried to get away from local admin accounts on the machines.
Yeah, that's what we were doing at a previous company, was that as a workaround. So it's
Yeah.
good to know that you're finding success in that. Any other issues other than what you just mentioned?
No, I just think the important thing is that since it's sort of a manual process, when somebody is getting a device for the first time, you stress the importance that you need to have these people enabled or they're not going to be able to log in.
Awesome, thanks.
Thanks. All right, great. Well, thanks for coming out.